Let's talk about running backs, baby. First up, currently going as the RB3 in a lot of formats, I would say. And most ADP I've seen, he's going as the RB3. Bijan Robinson. I talked about him last year, and I didn't have the nicest things to say when he was being drafted in the first round. But now, this is a whole different season, and he's still being drafted in the mid to back end of the round one. He's still being drafted back in to mid-tier or round one. And to me, I'm like, we saw the potential last year. He was the RB, he finished as the RB10 last year. We know Arthur Smith was the major problem in this offense. And now we get a major offensive coordinator upgrade with Zach Robinson come from the Rams tree. You know, the guy who made Kyron an All-Pro, Kyron Williams an All-Pro, the guy who we know Sean McVay has always had success running the football. Raheem Morris is the coach. He's come out this offseason and said, yo, Bijan is our guy. Zach Robinson was just quoted as saying, we want to use this guy like CMC. That means CMC's involved in the run game. He's involved in the pass game. He's their main focus in the red zone for the 49ers. You hear those words coming from the coaching staff about running this offense through Bijan Robinson, and you kind of look at previous usage. This has all the makings of like a game-breaking season for Bijan Robinson if things hit. The best, a lot of people were calling him a better prospect than Saquon Barkley when he came out, which is, I mean, Saquon was the prototypical prospect, and Bijan, a lot of people said he was either equal or better. So to get that kind of running back in this system, oh, man, it's going to be a fun thing. Now, you might be wondering, JN, he's already the RB3 in ADP. He already goes top 8, top 9 picks. How are you so much higher on him? I have Bijan Robinson as my number 1 player this season. He is my first pick overall, the number 1 running back off the board. And if we get 90%, 80% of what I think is possible out of Bijan Robinson this season, it's going to be a very fun year. A very fun season to have Bijan Robinson on your fantasy team. The great thing is, for those listening still right now, there's a lot of people who saw the clip of this and aren't getting this part right here. The beautiful thing is, you ain't got to take him first. You don't. You can wait to take Bijan until, pick 5, pick 6, pick 7, pick 8. A lot of people aren't going to see it the same way. Christian McCaffrey goes ahead of him. Breece Hall goes ahead of him. There's about 5 receivers that typically go ahead of him in PPR leagues. So you can get good value on Bijan Robinson. But if I had a top 8 pick, I'm for sure using it on Bijan first. That's the guy. He has the least amount of question marks, right? Like Bijan, I look at the question marks. He's young. He's got new offensive coordinator that fits his role on offense. They play indoors. You got a quarterback upgrade. There's a lot to love with Bijan. And then I look at the other picks. Tyreek Hill has a nasty fantasy playoff football schedule. CeeDee Lamb dealing with contract stuff. Is that going to go into the season? CMC, they're talking about reducing his workload so they can keep him healthy, getting Eli Mitchell a little bit more involved. AJ Brown and Jamar Chase have wide receiver twos that they have to deal with. Amon-Ra St. Brown, his entire team is loaded. You got Gibbs. They're hyping up Jameson Williams. We saw the importance of Sam Laporta last year. So he has kind of a cap on his ceiling. Jonathan Taylor has Anthony Richardson to deal with in the red zone. Saquon Barkley has AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside and may have tush pushes with Jalen Hurts. Out of all the top picks, this is the safest one. Justin Jefferson has either Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy throwing to him. Out of all the top picks, Bijan Robinson actually has the least amount of risk and the highest upside if everything hits. So give me Bijan Robinson, my top player on the board. It's a little unconventional, and if you see ranking somewhere else, you're going to see it differently. But Bijan Robinson is going to have a hell of a fantasy season if he stays healthy. All right, next up. Going right now is like the RB15, RB14, depending on the format and where you're looking at. Joe Mixon, who is now part of the Houston Texans, he was traded this offseason and finished as the running back 6 last year for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's been running back 13 or better in 5 of the last 6 seasons. Most of the time, he finishes as a top 10 running back. He had 1,000 yards rushing last year. Was involved in the passing game. So he's consistently been top 10. He gets moved to, in my opinion, a much better offense where the offensive line is getting better, right? It's a little bit of a concern, but it's getting better. Guess what? They can use him out of the passing game, out of the backfield. He can be a threat out of the backfield in the passing game. So I'm like, what are we concerned about with Joe Mixon is the fact that he's getting old. If that was the case, you think the Houston Texans would have signed him to a 3-year deal? No, they wouldn't have. This is their running back for the future, and he's going to have a very nice season with this offense. Think about how the defenses have to respect the passing game now that they got Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. It's going to open things up for Joe Mixon. We saw how Devin Singletary was in this offense in the second half of the year. Joe Mixon is being I don't even know the damn word to describe how bad he is being disrespected right now. I can't. Categorically, isn't that the word I'm looking for? Disrespected. That's the term. And Joe Mixon, to me, is a top 10 back in fantasy. There's no other way to put this. He's a top 10 back, and he's going outside of the top 10, outside of the top 12 running backs. You can get him as an RB2 in most of your drafts. So I get a little bit of concerns about the offensive line, or if you're worried about the workload, but the age, like, what's really your gripe with Joe Mixon when every year everybody says the same thing about him? He's inefficient, he's getting older, and he just continues to produce. He ain't one of the sexy names, but Joe Mixon is probably better than the dude you're drafting in the 3rd round. Probably better. I ain't going to hold you. He's probably going to end up better, and he has been 5 out of the last 6 years. Next up, we got to talk about my boy. He is now on the Eagles. Saquon Barkley. Yes, we doing that right now. I mean, when this news dropped, I was like, yo, this is a lock to be a top 2 back. And now things have happened since then, and obviously things get rearranged. But right now, Saquon Barkley's going either top 5 or top 6 when it comes to running backs, just depending on where you're looking, anywhere in that 4 to 6 range. Now, I get it. You got concerns, man. You've drafted Saquon Barkley high every single year, and he gets hurt or he lets you down. He hasn't been that guy except for, 2 years ago when he was top 5. We forget that really quickly, don't we? Right? And so you maybe you're concerned about his injuries. You're concerned he's 27 years old. You're concerned he was, maybe a little overworked in his time with the Giants. He had no offense around him. This situation is perfect for him right now. Perfect. We saw DeAndre Swift in this offense last year. He goes to now one of the worst offensive lines and offenses in all of football to now one of the best offensive lines and best offenses in all of football. And you think he won't be a top 3 running back? To me, Saquon Barkley is at a discount right now. A major discount. Because to be real, there's only one thing that's holding him back from being a lock, an absolute lock to be top 3 if he plays all 17 games. Only one thing. And that's Jalen Hurts. Now, there's been a big change in this offense, hasn't there? Kellen Moore is now the offensive coordinator here. And quote from Jalen Hurts, 95% of this offense has changed. There's one play in particular, that if it's gone from this offense or they decide they want to tweak it a little bit and maybe use Saquon Barkley in that role, his value skyrockets, and that's the tush push. Because now we go from a player who's probably going to score 6 to 8 touchdowns to probably more in the 13 to 15 touchdown range total. If the tush push is gone and Jalen Hurts is not rushing in 13 to 15 touchdowns a year, Saquon Barkley is going to be an absolute smash this year in fantasy football. So I love the value. Hopefully we find out a little bit more about the offense as the offseason goes on, but Saquon Barkley is going to be a steal in fantasy football this year. I promise you that. All right, next up, Najee Harris, man. Obviously, y'all know Najee. Y'all know Najee. It's a contract year now for Najee Harris, who didn't have his 5th-year option picked up. He had some terrible games last year. The year before that, dealing with the plate in his foot. But he did finish the season strong. And, to be a top 23 running back last season, the way it felt, if you hear everybody talk about Najee Harris, it's like he was a backup. It's like he was a bum. This dude was an RB2 last year in 12-team formats. But you hear everybody else tell it. He was trash. He was beyond repair. Y'all know he had a league-winning stretch in the fantasy playoffs. Y'all remember that, right? You guys do know he had 1,000 yards last season and 8 touchdowns. So why are we crying about Najee Harris's value right now when he's the RB24 in some drafts? He's a starting running back, and yeah, he got Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is the new coach now, new offensive coordinator. Arthur Smith's the new offensive coordinator. We got to deal with that. But y'all know Arthur Smith does love power football, right? Y'all know Arthur Smith does love those running backs. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Derrick Henry in Tennessee. He's got a track record. And Najee's a bigger back. He even lost some weight this year. He seems super motivated. I think Najee Harris, if he can just get a little bit of passing game work, more than he's had in the last couple seasons, a little bit of passing game work, and we see maybe a season of double-digit touchdowns out of Najee Harris in the Steeler offense, that's going to be a top 15 back. Y'all going to hate the take. I already know. Y'all going to hate the take. But it would not shock me to see Najee Harris inside of the top 15 running backs this season if he can get a little bit of receiving. I think right now, going as RB24, it's free. Najee Harris is free right now. Probably your RB3 in most drafts. Like, as you're going, people are going to skip on him because they felt like he did them dirty last year. But Najee's him. And I'm here to triple down on my Najee Harris takes. He will help you win your fantasy league this year, just like he did last year. All right. And then the last running back I'm going to talk about has been kind of inconsistent at times. He's been inconsistently consistent. Like, he'll go through phases throughout the year where he looks good, and there's other times where we're like, is he really helping us out? But he was the RB 18 and 19 in back-to-back seasons, Kenneth Walker. We talked about the offensive changes that are going to happen. Ryan Grubb is now the offensive coordinator. The pace is going to be a lot faster than it was under Pete Carroll. He's had successful, very successful red zone usage, elite, some would say, red zone usage early in his career. If the O-line's improved and he can stay healthy, why can't we call Kenneth Walker a top 15 back? Why is he going towards the back end of the top 20? We're taking guys over him that appear to have upside. He's in that James Conner range. That don't make no damn sense to me. Kenneth Walker is a third-year player who is going to get better. And the one thing is he's played 15 games in both, always kind of dealt with like nagging injuries at some point. But if we see any more explosive, any uptick in explosive plays or touchdowns with Kenneth Walker, especially with this improved O-line and faster offense, I mean, sky is the limit for this kid. He doesn't have to have as much involvement in the passing game. And I think even that's going to improve. The team has asked him to do more in the passing game this season. But even if it's just normal, I think we can expect an uptick in rushing performance out of Kenneth Walker. To see a 1,300-yard season out of this kid would not shock anybody. So I'm all over Kenneth Walker at his current ADP right now. Would feel very good if he was my second running back or even my starter. If I went 0 RB and he was my starter, I feel really good about him being my RB1. So Kenneth Walker to me is a player that I think a lot of people are enamored early on with rookies, and then when they don't pop, they don't become top 10 players. We forget about them very quickly. We start penalizing them and looking for the next guy. We start taking the guys like Jonathan Brooks over him. Kenneth Walker is him. And this is a player in his third year. If he takes a major leap, you ain't ever getting this draft price again. So Kenneth Walker, a player I'm very high on this year, especially with the new offense and new offensive line upgrades. All right. Y'all enjoying this?